Welcome back to the Pooja Bhatt Show, where we continue our conversation with Mr. Mahesh Bhatt, my father, and discuss the joys and the agony of success. With Naam and that heady success, which was something that you never got from a mass audience really, you suddenly decided to quit alcohol.
That had got to do with realization that either I will drink myself to death or I will slash my wrist and commit suicide. And it so happened that I went for some party, I believe. I don't know, have any memory which party, where. And when the dawn broke, I was lying on the footpath of Juhu Ville Parla scheme with my left face hitting the pavement, and the sun was just coming up. It was a leprous morning. And I couldn't figure out how I landed up on the pavement. And a voice in my head said, you become an alcoholic or drunk like anybody else with all your intellectual pretensions. You're not different from any other alcoholic whom you have felt superior to. So I remember I tried to hold Shaheen, and I got this feeling that she turned her face away from me.
Because of the stench of the alcohol.
When I reflect back, I can't imagine a young baby like that doing this head movement. But maybe my own feeling of wanting to kiss her froze me, and I had to attribute that she turned her face away. And then I said, no, I can't touch this drop of divinity which is there in my arms with the stench of alcohol. It was one moment which changed me completely.
And you never looked back.
I never drank again after that. Not even a drop of alcohol in what is called a cough syrup, which has got alcohol content. But I still fear at times that I may gravitate to ground zero if I have one glass of beer. It's like gunpowder and fire. You keep it away for 5,000 years, nothing will happen. The moment you make a contact between these two elements, explosion.
Well, I couldn't understand that until I came face to face with my own frailties.
So you inherited that from your father, your genes, all bad genes.
Well, I mean, it's a known fact that a child of an addict or an alcoholic is 4 times more susceptible.
So you should file a case against me. For
No, I don't need to.
Giving bad genes.
Yeah, but the same genes have made me also quit cold turkey, and I have never looked back. I'm going to be 9 years in December.
It's a lot of time. 9
You're, well,
years.
you're going to be 39 years soon, so that's
Well, I've
you only have
lived
about
longer on this planet.
Ironically, you cast me in a film called Daddy to
And
me
if
and
I
said,
want you.
you said that I have a role and it's about a father and a daughter, and the daughter is 17, and I think you'll be a good fit. It's not like I've written a film for you, you're right for this part. And my answer was, but I have not considered acting, because why? I've seen actors, filmmakers, technicians come and go. I've seen them lose, I've seen them win. And I've seen how unforgiving the media could be on occasion.
And failure is.
And of course, and failure is a part of life.
Yeah.
And then you said, I'm going to give you 24 hours to think about it. Get back to me. And I didn't get back to you. And then you told me that, okay, Dimple Kapadia has a daughter called Twinkle Khanna. And I said, hang on. And you laughed. And you said, oh, you don't want to be an actor, but the thought of this role going to somebody else is making your body go up in flames. That means you're made for this, do it.
Yes.
And I said yes to it. And then I felt that, okay, now I'll have to walk my talk because I've grown up on your sets.
Yeah.
The spot boys, the light men, your assistants have seen me as a kid. And it was really about, will I be able to impress these people more? And you told me very categorically that if you are not going to be good, I'm going to throw you out. And I'm not going to give the world the privilege of telling you that you're no good. As a parent, I have to tell you that you're no good. So go and learn your lines, and I'm going to test you.
Yeah. I still remember that moment. I just gave it to you as I read it.
Yeah.
And you read it. And you read it well. And you were relieved and you went to sleep.
You decided to make Daddy for Doordarshan.
Yeah.
And the entire industry told you that what the hell is wrong with you, Mr. Mahesh Bhatt? You're launching your daughter and you want her to be in a TV film? But you were very clear that you wanted every home to see it because you felt that it was a story that would be relevant to a lot of people here. And you created history in that sense because what it did give me was my first film, which will be mentioned in my obituary, which is still a relevant film to the times that we live in.
It'll always be.
Very forward for its time.
It's very, very powerful in terms of its plot. A young girl, 17, helps her has-been alcoholic father achieve not only the fight against alcohol, but also regain his lost glory. So that was a very powerful plot and still remains etched on people's hearts because, as you rightly said, it reached the consciousness of the nation. The biggest theatre was Doordarshan.
Very bold of them to
Yeah, very bold of them. They were
greenlight a story like this.
they were more liberal than all these platforms.
And this was 1989.
And they came on the heels of the memory of Janam. Because Janam was 87.
So it would be fair to say that you created your own OTT before OTT. I mean, Doordarshan was the OTT of our times.
I did in a way, yes.
And the first day was at Filmistan Studios.
The first shot I remember,
Station.
it was through the prison bars. You enter
With
and you
Zuchi.
have a conversation. I said, let me go closer to her slowly.
Right.
Let her make an entry in the white. So in the white shot, I saw that you entered with the right body language. You came with a pre-story. You came with the knowledge that you're coming to a place where you shouldn't be coming and you are embarrassed. Anupam is in prison and then you point out towards the camera.
Yeah.
And so, aadmi mera baap hai.
2 days before that, when you launched the film, we were shooting at Pali Hill, I remember, with Nina and Akash Khurana. And when they were packing up that day, Jagan, the spot boy who's worked with you for eons,
Yeah, he said,
अभी कल पूजा बेबी का शूटिंग है, देखते हैं कि एक्टिंग कर पाएगी या नहीं कर पाएगी. And I was like, oh my lord. So who cared about critics outside? I had to impress these guys because they've seen it all.
I was telling this yesterday to Amit ji at the ad shoot, that we are a tribe and we know the inside stories, how we feel, which is so unique, which the outsiders can't figure out. So I know the approval of them was paramount to you.
Yeah, it was paramount to me. I think that a story that people need to hear is how the climax of Daddy was rewritten after what transpired one night. Do you remember we were shooting the climax at Bhaidas Hall and we had a schedule of 3 or 4 days and then we were leading up to the final scene where Anupam Kher, who is a failed singer and has been spending time away from the spotlight, actually musters the guts to come and perform in front of an entire auditorium. And the so-called villain, who's my grandfather in the film, sends his stooge to tempt him with a glass full of whiskey and tell him that, hey, it'll soothe your nerves. Just have one sip, one sip. And it was written in a way where my character was meant to appear at that point and fling that glass out of my father's hands. And then he goes and sings. But something happened the day before that.
Life happened. I remember we were at home and Sony had gone away to Hong Kong with Shaheen. And the house was all empty. The boys had come and they had taken the brief for the next day and they had left. I had proclaimed to the world I'd given up drinking. And when they used to come, I used to be very generous with whiskey. And then finally you and me were there and you went to sleep because you had to shoot the next day. So I was picking up the bottle to put it back into the makeshift bar. That's when the thought crept into me that, look, the world is asleep. The child is asleep. You've announced to the world that you have given up drinking. And you have done well. You've not taken a drop of alcohol since then. why don't you just have a drink or two to, you've had a tough day. It's a very important day tomorrow to shoot. And the thought crossed my mind, and as soon as it raised its head and became an impulse, simultaneously a voice rose in me which said that, okay, Mahesh Bhatt, you can fool your child who's sleeping. You can fool the world that you've given up drinking and be a closet drinker. But how the hell are you going to fool yourself? And that reduced the impulse to ashes. And then I said, wow, that's the transformation.
Correct.
The narrative cannot find its closure unless the child, like your character of Pooja, succeeds in bringing that inner transformation in him, not through her presence, not through coercion, but it must create that curve where he is till now a person who is keeping himself on the leash.
Right.
Now he has finally managed to unleash himself into life. And he has to go out daring to live life without this crutch.
And then you came to set the next morning and you called everybody and you said, "Idhar aao." Scene change ho gaya, climax change ho gaya. And then you narrated this, I remember, and everybody looked at you and we were all in agreement because the voice has to come from within.
Yeah.
It's what you do when nobody is watching. It's when the world has its eyes averted and the lies you tell or refuse to tell yourself.
Those are the worst lies that you tell yourself. And you know, what is very important, Pooja, is that was also dramatically right for the film in terms of storytelling.
Correct.
The character finally changes. And that was the triumph. Life writes, you steal. It's a gift of life.
Yes.
So, is there anything that I can claim as original? No. It happened to me, and I just like a good mirror reflected that moment within the idiom of cinema that I understood.
But talking about original and authentic, I think then we came to another pivotal point when we finished Daddy and when it came to the dreaded process of dubbing, because we didn't have sync sound in those days. So we had to go through the entire movie all over again in isolation and dub every sigh and breath and word. And there was this kind of feeling in the professionals there that maybe my voice is too husky, because people in India are used to hearing Hindi film heroines sound a little bit more feminine and softer. And then Rakesh Ranjan ji was called, very fine sound recordist, and he reviewed it and he got me to try it in a couple of ways. And then the choice had to be made that should we keep Pooja Bhatt's voice or should we get her voice dubbed by a dubbing artist? And then I still remember what you said. You said, no, either the world rejects her for what she is or the world accepts her for what she is, with her flaws, with this husky voice, with the lisp, the way she is.
It's all about that, Pooja. You exist as a unique force of life, independent. Those cultural measures will be there. But if you succumb to that and cut yourself and prune yourself to fit into those regressive, dead ideas which were dead even before you were born, then you throttle something living in you. It's an act of self-mutilation. And I think the only thing an elder can do or a director can do in our field or co-traveler can do is to tell the other person, just retain that uniqueness which is what defines you as you. And of course, there are certain parameters of the idiom within which you have to conform. But that essential salt of life which you have born with has to be there.
I'm extremely grateful to you because I was not aware that my voice was different in that sense. But when that discussion came up, you start feeling that, I don't fit into the, like you said, I don't fit into the mold. But what you did was break the mold and you freed me. Not only by allowing me to use my voice in the film, but allowing me to always express myself and find my voice in the real sense.
Every voice has a face. That's why when a voice echoes in your mind, it comes with the face, the image. And you can't divorce it from the other.
You know, I've spoken to people who are stalwarts with Alcoholics Anonymous, and they say that we consider your father to be like a black swan. He's a rarity, somebody who's never been part of the program, never seeked help outside of yourself.
Pooja, there's no power outside man. There is no power. Of course, we have a physiological limitation that we are weighed down with, but there's nothing that if you put your heart into, and if you want to do it, that you can stop you from achieving it.
Yeah, but easier said than done. It's not easy. The reason I say you gave me life is because you rebirthed me in the real sense. And like you saw something in Shaheen turning away, I read something in the message you sent me in December 2016, which made me stop drinking. You never told me once not to drink.
Yeah, people used to come and tell me, you must tell Pooja
Yeah.
to be about drinking. I said, who the hell gives me the right to say that? I to talk to my children and pontificate and advise them. I've broken every rule in the book. I cannot go and tell her this.
I was in my wasteland phase, really. And you sent me a message. I remember the quote also was about that, man cannot make a worm, but yet he makes gods daily. And I said to you, I agree or something. And you signed off saying, I love you, kid. To which I responded, I love you, pops. And then I added that actually at this point, you are the only thing in my universe truly worth loving. And the message you sent me back changed my life. Because you just said, if you love me, then love yourself. Because I live in you. It was not the message, but it's what I read between the words. And I sent you a message saying, I promise from today I'm going to be the best me possible. Though that night I went out and drank 3/4 of a bottle of Lafroig, my favorite tipple. And woke up in the morning, looked at myself in the mirror and asked myself loudly, is this being the best you? And the answer was a resounding no.
Yeah.
And then it was Christmas Eve.
Yes.
And I sat in my little apartment with my cats and I could hear silent night wafting in from the windows. And I didn't drink. And I woke up feeling like I had scaled Mount Everest the next day. A couple of years after I'd quit, when I had that dream that I got drunk and I woke up with a start and I felt like I was on that Snakes and Ladders board and I landed up exactly when I called you. And I said, I had a dream I was drinking beer. And you said, Pooja, it happens to me still.
Yeah, it still happens to me.
So I was so relieved, but I had that living reference to call, you see. A lot of people were a little taken aback that I was talking about my so-called affliction so openly because I decided to make the world my Alcoholics Anonymous class. I drank openly.
Oh,
I
really?
refused to recover in the shadows. And I feel कि शराब भी कोई मर्द की जागीर नहीं है. Women drink more today than men do. So I feel that it's important for women to speak out even more and claim this space of recovery for themselves. So the question I want to ask you is, do you think Daddy could be made from the female perspective?
Now, after this conversation, it should be made from a female perspective.
Because where is the story of female alcoholism or addiction on the Indian screen? Why have we never seen it through the female gaze? In Daddy, you had a father who left for 17 years and came back.
Yeah.
If a mother leaves for 17 months, and will they allow her to come back?
We'll make it possible through our fiction.
So I'm going to hold you to that. After Daddy, you entered what people refer to as the golden phase of not only your career, but the golden phase of romance, really, where you unleashed upon the world your own love story through Ashiki and Dil Hai Ke Mantani and Sadak. But to first revisit the monumental meeting with my mother, Lorraine Bright.
I was 16, she was 14. And there was Bombay Scottish Orphanage. She was living in the orphanage because her mother did not have means to keep her as a day scholar.
She became a boarder, yeah.
And she became a boarder. And one day I saw this gorgeous girl standing with her friends at the gate of Bombay's Cottage. There's something about her that kind of drew me to her. But somehow love is preceded by the feeling of unworthiness. But I'm worthy enough to go to her and with this form of mine and me as I am to say that I like you. So it took me a couple of rounds on 2 evenings or 2 or 3 evenings. But something in that silence, though there was a traffic going in between, something had exchanged between both of us. What is that something? Don't ask me what it is. So I went there and I introduced myself as my name is Mahesh and what is yours? And I offered her a Milan Supari. I remember this.
Milan Supari?
I don't know why. And she, because I think I was nervous. And the other girls disappeared, leaving her alone. I think they had sensed that this was a moment between a boy and a girl. So I said, what's your name? And she said, Lorraine Bright. And that was it. The bell rang and she just disappeared after mentioning her name. And I was struck by something which I can't even begin to describe. There was this tailor who has been immortalized in Ashiki, called Supreme Tailor, who's played by Mushtaq.
Played by Mushtaq.
And called Master Ji. He was to stitch school uniforms, so he had that huge assignment. So I, struck by her charm and by her beauty, begged him to carry my letter to her.
A love letter?
A love letter. And it was he who reluctantly first expressed to me the hazards of doing that, because if he's caught, then he will lose a sizable
His contract.
part of his income because they'll throw him out from the job. But he was a generous man. So he took my letter and I waited whether she would reply. And then she started replying.
How did she send her letter back to you?
She used to give it to him.
So he was the carrier.
He was the carrier. He was Cupid to me. And then our letters started increasing. Then she wrote to me a letter also in blood.
You wrote to her in blood the first time?
Yeah, I wrote to her in blood and she also replied in blood. One day Supreme came to me and said, no letter. And I was heartbroken. I said, why? She said, no, he wants to meet you. So I was wondering, how could you meet her? I could meet her because this was a fortress. So he whispered to me that she said she will, during the recess time, I must not come there and stand there. I must steal from behind and come into the section, which is the laboratory, and there is a classroom downstairs. And she has bribed the watchman to keep one of the classroom doors open. And she will come there. And then I remember playing the role of Steve McQueen from Stalag 17 of war film. And there were these menacing figures of the matron, and the door was open. That was the door to paradise, right? And I went inside the classroom. And I remember that moment, it's a magical moment. Dusk was setting in. The glow of the orange sky was seeping in. And there was some dust in the air because of the class. And then I could hear my heart beat. And then I heard her footsteps. And then suddenly she appeared holding her sandals in her hand. She just stood there. And she said, I want to see your face, she says. So I took out the matchbox and I lit a matchstick. And I could feel the light up my face. And then she said, okay, I have to go. And she decided to turn and go. I said, no, wait, please. And she waited. And I walked up to her and then I lit a match and I held it to her face. And Pooja, I saw her face, the face of your mother. I will never forget that face. She was the most beautiful woman I have ever seen in my life. She had freckles. The glow of the light and that flame. And then I remember it burnt my finger and it fell off, right? And there was darkness. And then she turned and she said, gesture to me, go. And then I slipped past her and I looked back and she said, go to me. And then she ran. And I was never the same again. And so I started meeting her. But
Covertly.
But we used to stand at a distance, right? And I had never touched her at all. One day I went and like all good and bad stories happened.
You got caught.
I got caught.
And then what happened?
And then
All hell broke loose.
all hell broke loose. Supreme lost his job.
Oh my God. And my grandmother was summoned.
And the next thing I knew that she was thrown out of school. And she was taken back with her mother to Bhaikala. And then I had to meet the parent of that girl, an Anglo-Indian girl. So I remember going there. And she said, what the hell have you got me into? And she's thrown out now. What happens to her? Where will I keep her? So I remember telling her that I'll take care of her. I'll take care of her. It must have sounded absurd to that woman. A 16-year-old boy saying, I'll take care of her. But I did take care of her.
And you still take care of her.
Yeah, I took her to YWCA, forged a letter from my father's letterhead, typed it, forged it that she's working
Oh my
because
God.
YWCA could only keep girls who were working girls, right? And that scene is in Arth. Rajkiran gives a fake letter, signs it, because she's got a job problem there. And then I used to take her to teach her typing and stenography, and I would, it was in Flora Fountain, and she would spend her day, because she had to pretend to them that she's working. And then I had to come and pick her up later on in the afternoon and take her to coaching classes. And I would wait outside like parents wait for children. And she was a very good student. And then she got a job, Hindustan Machine and Tools.
As a receptionist.
As a receptionist, a telephone operator. I really believed in the fairy tale love, and I believed that I would take care of her for the rest of her life, which I'm doing. But as they say, don't judge your parents till you're a parent yourself. When I fell into a relationship, Parveen Bhavi, I discovered that when I came back home, I remember that moment, that it was dawn and you were sleeping and she was awake. And I got into the room and she looked at me. She says, later. I said, yeah, I had some work. She says, can you have tea? I went to the bathroom and I still remember we had this strange yellow
Bathroom. Yeah, we did. It's strange that you remember it.
Yeah. And I looked into the mirror and I said, all your life you hated your father for keeping your mother, as the other woman. What are you doing? What have you done? And that fairy tale romance construct which I had spun in my head was reduced to ashes. And then that began the most turbulent phase of my life.
It was actually Yuji who told you that you should not be in this relationship because it will destroy you and destroy...
He said that you can't help her. She will sink. You can't leave the movies. She can't be here. You are like fire and she is like gunpowder. She will explode. And then.
So she resented Yuji for that?
Yuji said she's finished with the film industry and she can't go back. And she resented that fact that she couldn't go back. She couldn't come to terms with the reality. So she came back.
There are very few men I have met or encountered who once they hold a woman's hand, do not let go. What strikes me is that the love story, the nature of that love might change, but the love never goes away. I mean, today you're more like a parent Perhaps you were like a parent even then, but perhaps
I was always a parent to her.
she knows that no matter what, she can rely on you.
Yeah.
You have conveyed that to her. You have held her hand and never let go, and you have never made her feel that you are stretching yourself by providing.
Yeah, because to give her that security is my need.
Yes, but the thing is that you see, people always remind the other person कि मैं आपके लिए ये सब कुछ कर रहा हूँ. I have provided the home. I am sending the money. At every point, people are reminding each other about these things. For me, I think it's important to acknowledge that I've watched you, and I think children don't learn by listening to their parents. You watch the actions, and the actions and the words have to match, and they do not in majority of the cases. Is that you lived that. When you said to her, my grandmother, that I will look after her,
Yes, I did.
you still continue to look after her.
Yes. And I remember there came a moment when she was unwell. I said, even if Pooja and Sunny leave her
I will
and
be
go
there.
away, I will be there. I will take care of her. And I will do it. I'm responsible for her.
But you know, for me, the most moving thing, the two things, I'll never forget the way she came and told me that Shaheen was born. And when she said that, you have a sister now. And I said, how do you know? She said, he called me. So you made that first phone call from the hospital to her. Secondly, was when they questioned the legitimacy of your marriage, first and second to Sony. And they said, oh, in that case, you know, who gave permission? And I'll never forget that day when my mother got up and said, who gave permission? I gave permission. He has my blessings. And that was such a moving scene for me. And I think I said people don't even, what they write off so easily as functional or dysfunctional. As if
Yes.
any of those
Yes.
rules operate in their own lives.
Yeah, you see, those aberrations that you say you see in society, there's more depth to those relationships than what meets the eye.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, for 60 years, I can't be possibly be responding to her without any feeling that I'm doing her a great favor. It's her right to call me and say, I need you to deal with this. And I stand exactly the way I stood when I was responsible for her getting out of school.
And then you use that in Ashiki, and the rest is history. That golden phase of Ashiki, Dil Hai Ke Manta Nahi, Sadak, Sir, which was based on that one line that you heard Yuji say when Yuji found out that his son had cancer.
Yeah, and how his son's girlfriend's father, a Catholic gentleman, lives in the foothills of Mount Mary's Church. He said she was getting ready. He says, why don't you all come inside? And so Yuji said, let's go inside. So he came very guiltily to him. And he said that it's not fair, sir. It's not fair that out of all the people, why should God, punish this child? Your son should get cancer. It's not fair. So he said, if not my son, who else's son? I think he's a very fair God. Do I want somebody else's son to get cancer? No. It was such a human moment where he just said it, meaning every word. And that became the heartbeat of that movie. And the relationship of Paresh Rawal in that picture was mine relationship with Yuji. That's why when the scene where he carries
a bag on his shoulder.
I used to do that for Yuji when he used to come back from Europe. And I used to carry it and people used to watch and he used to smile and say, people are looking. I said, so what, I'm your coolie.
But you had Sir and Hame Rai Pyar Ki released together.
Simultaneously, they were together in one cinema hall, Ganga Jamna at Worli. And I remember going to the projection because there used to be this tradition of where filmmakers would go to the projectionists, give them money so that they'll control the sound levels and keep the arcs.
And change the reel smoothly.
And to do the reel changeover and not to get drunk at night and mess up the film. So I was going from one projector which was beaming sir, go to the other ones, beaming Hame Rahi Pyar Ke. And when I stepped out, the black marketers came to me and said, wow, sir, aapne to hamara Diwali bana di. And they were selling tickets for both the movies in black.
That's amazing.
But when I came back from there, I remember stopped by in the Hinduja hospital. Mama was not well. There was something empty in me. I said, why is it that I'm having such a phenomenal run? Ashiki, Dilaka Mantani, Sadak, Hame Rahi Pyar Ke, Sachi, sir. I went into what is the wasteland phase, where I went in, became a kind of a workaholic. I used to work around the clock. Then I was getting completely disillusioned by this whole medium of cinema, because what I was feeling and thinking and wanting to express was something which the idiom that we have was not broad enough to absorb it. But then I was very gratified when Mama told me that, look, they were taking me down to the MRI and I heard the ward boy tell the nurse, handle her properly, she's Mahesh Bhatt's mother. And that took all my pain away. But something was withering in me. And Pooja, when beauty fades, you see it. When talent fades, nobody sees it. The volcano was drying up. The rumbling had stopped.
So this phase of yours, what you call the wasteland supposedly, even though in your wasteland phase you found yourself in South Africa and you met the great Nelson Mandela. And I still have the book he gave you, his autobiography, in which he's signed to Mahesh Bhatt, an extraordinary man.
Oh, yes. I'll never forget his laughter. He had a full-bodied laughter. I remember asking him, I said, we were going through a bad phase. Our government was what you call the revolving door government. Prime Minister would come and Prime Minister would go. I think Gujral Sahab was there that time, the Prime Minister. So I asked him, I said, sir, what is your advice to India? When you look at India, how do you see our problems? Then he said, it's preposterous for me to tell the land of Gandhi what they should do. You see, we are such an ancient civilization. All I can say is that when the going gets rough and the storm starts raging, you hold each other's hand and walk. If you all come together, no power can beat you all. There's nothing extraordinary about me. What could he have seen in 20 minutes in me? He was an extraordinary man because an extraordinary man makes you feel extraordinary. A small man makes you feel small, a big man makes you feel big in a short time. He was a generous man, and that generosity is now etched in that book which you are in possession of.
When I read in his book as a child, when he had a kind of a skirmish with somebody his age, and he said, even then I defeated my opponent without dishonoring him. And that has remained with me.
Yeah.
And that's largely how I've seen you conduct your life as well, unknowingly. And I think that's what we are missing in the public discourse today, is that we have forgotten how to disagree respectfully.
That's why I keep on going back to our memory of what I told you in Bangalore when we had gone for the location hunting
For
of
Sadak 2.
Sadak 2.
Yeah, you and Sarita were at the airport.
And I said, look, Pooja, do not allow anybody to force his way of thinking onto you. But that's only half the job. You too must make sure that you don't force your way of thinking onto somebody else. And I think inevitably that's where the problem is. The coin has two sides.
Correct.
This is, I'm not going to live your life, whatever you prescribe to me. But I don't want to impose my way of thinking and what I believe onto people. So I think that's when you smell what is perhaps freedom.
Another defining memory to jump ship is, of course, Awarapan, Banjarapan from Jism. And not very many people know this, but it was Saeed Qadri who wrote the lyrics of what became that song as a poem and an ode to you, to describe you.
Yes, I met him after 14 years in Jodhpur. He was a struggling lyricist and he went away defeated.
There's some connection with Rajasthan and you, I think.
And then he came, he got to know Mahesh Bhatt is coming to this for a book function release. So his cousin told him, go over there and meet him. He said, no, yeah, he's become a big man now. I don't think he'll recognize me. And I don't want to feel insulted and humiliated. So he said, no, try it. How do you know? If he doesn't recognize you. So he took the risk. The moment I came down, I saw him, I said, Saeed Qadri, and all the ideas that he had of his not being recognized, acknowledged, just fell away.
Yeah.
So I took him to my room and he said, just don't talk to me now. I want to write something about you. And it's just coming out of me. And then he sat down there and right in front of me, he wrote this Avarapan Banjarapan. And he said to me that this is for you. This is you.
Ek khala hai sine mein.
Yeah. This is you. And I remember immediately calling you. And I said, Pooja, I've got a song for your movie.
That's a defining song.
That's a defining song.
I must say, I loved the lyrics, but I couldn't understand how it fit into this. And then
Yeah.
you said, no, that's the hero's heartland.
Yeah.
And I was quite stunned. Like I was when you said, we need a man like John Abraham, because he was not even an actor then, he was a model.
Yeah.
And I was like, why? You said, we don't need a boy, we need a man.
Man, and who's a wreck?
And you said, for this movie, I only want John Abraham. I do not want anybody else. And I must say, he was so astute. He responded to one line of the story and said, I'm doing this movie.
Yeah.
And the rest is history.
He used to give everything.
He used to
His
give everything.
totality worked.
That's true. But leading up to that, I remember we had that fight and I wasn't taking your call. And your dear friend Asghar Ali took you to meet Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
And you called me and you said, okay, not taking my call, but listen, I'm taking you to come with me to meet Paul McCartney. And I took the call and I said, you can't bribe me with the Beatles. My fight with you is not going to evaporate because now you're dangling the promise of meeting Paul McCartney in front of my eyes. Maybe I would have copped out if it was John Lennon. And then you went and met Paul McCartney.
Oh, yes. I wanted to meet him because I wanted to tell myself and tell the world that I met Paul McCartney. And then
But you
tell
grew
myself.
up to his music. You wooed my mother to
Yeah,
his...
your mother. I used to sing to her. I used to make my hair like Paul. When in those days, I had some hair on my head. And I used to sing Love, Love Me Too. And I want to hold your hand. She was just 17. So he came and with his girlfriend, Heather. I asked him 2 questions. I said, do you dream of John? He said, yes, I dream of John. He's too powerful a person not to dream about. And then he started talking about how the music would flow into him. And he said, but actually the music came from up there, from somewhere. Some mysterious power was there which was giving us the music. So I said, if that was the case, Paul, why did you copyright your music? So he looked at me. I said, yes. I said, you want stardom plus divinity. He said, no, it's not that. It's the managers who ask you to do copyright and all that. So he was struck by the question.
And then you got me his autograph.
Yeah.
Then he came back.
And he came to see Raz and I remember showing it to him in Dimple Theatre. A very generous guy. The song was coming, Aapke Pyar Mein Hum Sawarne Lage. He was singing the tune. And then when Asghar told him time for the flight, he reluctantly got up to leave. And he was still looking at the screen. So I said, yes, picture's a hit because if you can make Paul McCartney turn back and look at the screen and not just try it out, something is right. And then he waited. He said, I want to speak to the lady, the Sophia Loren of India.
Lovely. Bipasha.
And Bipasha was in Goa.
Shooting.
So I called her up. I said, there's somebody who wants to speak to you. She says, who? I said, Paul McCartney. She says, what? I said, Paul McCartney. No. I said, yes. And he was so generous, so nice to her. And Pradeep Guha got a whiff of it and it was splashed all over Bombay Times the next day.
Yeah, but it's big news. I mean, Paul McCartney
comes
watching a film
watches,
and then...
watches Raz. And, well, that was my encounter with Paul McCartney.
And soon after, Jane Campion, the Oscar-winning director, was visiting you. This is just after she finished In the Cut with Meg Ryan. And you had brought her to Rajkamal Studios where I was doing the mixing of Jism.
Yes. And she saw the
She
climax.
walked in and saw the climax and she looked at it and she said, this movie is going to be a hit. And I said, why do you say that? She said, because it's Byronic, knows what it is. And she looked at John and she said, he looks like Robert Mitchum. And I was quite stunned by how generous she was and how she watched completely. And then I came over to your house for dinner later. She was staying with you and Sony and she was with her little daughter. And I was in a phase at that point where I was in an ugly relationship that ended up breaking up really badly, and that became fodder for the gossip mills, and it was on the front page of the newspaper, etc. And she asked me, she said, what's going on with you? And then I told her, I said, right now I'm in this situation where I've just had the world and their aunts give a opinion on how I should lead my life. And she just looked at me, I remember, and she told me about Meg Ryan. And Meg Ryan, when she ended her relationship with Dennis Quaid, was judged by a large part of the world. And she was at the Dorchester in London. And she said Meg was going to the elevator and she felt every person in the lobby was staring at her, judging her. And she pressed the lift button to go up and the elevator came, opened. But what Meg decided to do was not to scuttle away. She turned around and she looked each one in their eye until they turned away. And the elevator went up and it came down and it went up and it came down. And finally, when every person had turned away, she got into the elevator. When I was so struck by that.
What a scene.
And here was Jane Campion, this filmmaker, telling me about a Hollywood icon who one has grown up watching Meg Ryan's movies, and how I was able to use that and apply that to my life in India at that time.
Wow.
So in a way, we are all really connected, aren't we?
Human beings are pathetically similar.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Paul McCartney watches Raz like a child, hums the song, is able to reach out to Bipasha, compliment her.
Generous.
Jane was so generous to me.
Generosity is a defining attribute of an artist. A person who is not generous cannot be an artist. Because that's the shadow
Right.
of generosity. His entire personality is the shadow of the generous spirit.
Right.
Because he imbibes from the generosity of life, of people. He soaks all that what he says is his wealth. Is not his.
Right.
It is accumulated. You're just a vehicle to dispense it.
But we must talk about Vishwesh Films and what you all set about doing there and did very effectively, which is basically junk the star system and create new people, because you spoke about generosity earlier. So I think there can be nothing more generous than giving people their due and not waiting for them or somebody else to make them stars before you then join that line and cast them. Why that decision to junk the star system and create new stars? Not only actors, but technicians, music directors,
Yes.
people behind the camera. With every film that came out of Vishesh Films or Fisheye Network, a new career was born.
See, because it's cheaper to create stars than to buy stars. And when you go to a star, line up outside his makeup man or go to his house, you already have conceded to yourself that, I don't have the wings to go there without this particular star's support. My journey in the movies taught me that.
You wrote me a letter on the 30th of January 2004 when Papa's releasing. What you told me in that letter was, forget making films for posterity. The world that you are at the threshold of was once ruled by giants who disappeared without a ripple. Just sing your song and go. But do you know what doing that means? It means to sing your song, you have to have the courage to be yourself. That means you have to be alone in this world, one without a second. And let me tell you, you have that courage. Filmmaking really is a journey of the alone to the alone.
Yes.
And when I became a filmmaker, understood for the first time, even though I was an actor, you don't understand what it's like when you're left with your print and you can sense that the market is not really hot in that sense. And when you got to finish that movie and bring it out there, it's very lonely. So I don't know how you did it all your life and continue to do so.
Through that loneliness, you connect to the collective loneliness. It requires a different kind of courage to be a director.
Yeah.
Because everybody can hide behind a director.
Yeah.
The director can't hide behind anybody.
And you gave me an amazing insight about critics. You wrote, the critic is like a mosquito who sucks your blood not because he hates you, but because your blood is his food.
Yeah. It's a livelihood.
He stings you to survive. A flea may irritate a horse for a few moments, but a horse is still a horse and a flea remains a flea. When I read that to friends who are critics, they're like, ouch. But what you're trying to say is that, and I've understood, is that, look, this world belongs to people who dare to dream and go and put themselves on that stage. That's why 98% of the world watches.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to comment. And now everybody has an opinion.
Very difficult.
Everybody's a critic now.
Very difficult to be a performer. Very
Yeah,
difficult.
but to go into that arena, to put your gloves on and, risk being mocked.
Failure is a certainty. Success is a fluke in this business.
I agree.
Those who don't have the stomach to deal with that reality should have nothing to do with this business.
Yeah, so they used to say what, 4:1?
5:1.
5:1. 5 flops to 1 hit.
Yeah.
And then you have to start all over again. You have to walk into every office, even with a hit, and say, hey, I'm so and so, and I just made this movie and I made it for this much, because people have no memory.
People have no memory, and because they go by the collective market pulse, which is got a memory of what they call of goldfish.
The music company had a problem with my posters and hoardings of Jism because they felt historically that, a black on black image would not grab people's attention. It wouldn't stand out. And when I called you complaining, you said, Pooja, anything new they will oppose. Anything new.
Yeah.
So you got to stick to your guns.
Yeah. That's
Dig your heels in.
Because they're frightened. They are risk-averse people. There's too much money involved, so they want to be sure. And you cross every T, dot every I, and tick all boxes, and you are guaranteed to make a flop. You have to have that reckless gene, that unknown factor that makes it into a success. You don't know.
But do you think when you talk about Kuljit Pal and you talk about people like that, those were the real gamblers?
They were gamblers. They were. Today, if I look at my life, I owe it to him in a way, because if he had not stuck to his conviction that I had in the film, he saw that conviction in me. He would have made me do things which were suicidal for him.
We were sitting under this poster of Chaudhary Ka Chand,
Yeah.
where you were telling me this incident when you was a little boy went
Yeah. We were staying in Union Park, which is Imran's grandmother's house, which is now Ketna. And bang opposite, there was M. Sadiq Saab's bungalow, a 2-story bungalow. And one morning, there was this lot of activity for the square at Union Park, which is the Beverly Hills of Mumbai, Pali Hill, Union Park. The who's who lived there. Mr. M. Sadiq was sitting on a chair, very somber, and furniture and all the goods of his house was being taken out into the garden. It was being auctioned and being taken away, and his house was being sold because he had made a film in which he had lost a lot of money, and he owed the market money, and so his property was attached. So I remember my mother walked up to me and she gave me a whack on my head. And she said, "Kya tamasha dekh raha hai?" There was his son, Mahmood. Take him out to play. It's not good to see your father being humiliated this way. They will lose this house. So I remember going with Mahmood, with Imran's father, Anwar. And we played. They thought the children don't know.
Children know.
He knew that the father had said to him that I'm not going to be living here. And then he made Chaudhary Ka Chand, which they say was actually ghost directed by Mr. Durudat himself. But since it was Lucknow, the Islamic ethos, perhaps was an able hand to have on set.
But they put everything on the table.
That's what these guys were. Like the famous story of Naushad Saab told me about the Mehboob Saab was this, that he wanted to make Aan in Technicolor. He had seen color films come to India and he said, Rangin picture banani, Rangin. And the technology was only available in London and it was costing 3.5 lakhs rupees. I remember Mr. Naushad telling me in the 50s. So he mortgaged Mehboob Studio. So Naushad said, I went to tell him, what the hell are you doing? It is suicidal.
Right.
And he just said, if I don't have faith in my film, who else will have?
Correct.
And he succeeded by putting every buck of his into his movies.
And today you have a largely corporate culture.
And it's not their money, and they're scared about the small jobs that they have. And
Right.
yeah, there were reckless people who mortgaged their wife's jewelry, their flats and their properties, and put money into movies. Those are different people.
Yeah.
They're branded stupid. And then the wisdom came, don't make movies with your own money. Make it with somebody else's money. Means what? So we are brought up with that culture of selling tickets in the box office. Every ticket sold was food at our table, right?
Right.
And then stand there and look at the audience response and see their body language. And however painful it is, take their verdict and go home.
Yeah.
And then it stays in your memory box, and you assimilate something with your body, like an animal when it goes out for a hunt. You learn something subliminally, and that becomes your priceless wisdom. You don't become a filmmaker till you have had your first release and watched your film with the audience, whether it's rejected or it becomes a hit.
Yeah, you're right. A lot of people are suddenly, again, talking about what you have put into motion, which was work with new people, cast people who are right for the part, not necessarily stars. With Mohit's amazing success with Sayyara, people are now saying, yes, you should only work with new people. You should not take stars.
But it takes Aditya Chopra to back him.
Yeah, no doubt.
I did tell him, look, Mohit, make stars. Don't go to stars. That's a bogus security you get. You'll work harder. You can do it. You're a talented boy. Aditya gave him all the support, and he was graceful enough to say, all that is there on the screen is Mohit. It is his own unique idiom that he has created. And he has come into his own with this film. And he has got a phenomenal success. But it took him 14 films to reach here.
Yeah, it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
That's what people,
So,
a lot of polling, a lot of getting out.
14 films to reach here. And then I told him, I said, now be careful that you don't hold it like a Ming vase, that somebody, you have to then have the courage to gamble your success completely.
Yes.
And turn the wheel over. There's no other way.
Correct. So now you're going to turn the tables. If I keep asking you questions, we'll have to soon convert this show from the Pooja Bhatt show to the Mahesh and Pooja Bhatt show, because we can talk for 50 episodes. But is there anything you would like to ask me?
I wanted to ask you only one thing. How did you cope with a reckless father like me? I don't fit into the definition of what an ideal father is.
Is there an ideal father?
No, that definition of the word.
No, I remember saying to somebody when I was very young that, you know what, keep your so-called normalcy, because my father might not have been home at the same time every day. And
Or not
we
being
can't
home
tick
at all.
the box about sitting around the table and having a meal together, supposedly, where people don't say anything to each other. Earlier, there was not even a phone to hide behind. So I said that my father, when he's there, he's fully present. And I genuinely mean, Papa, the idea of a broken home, I know far more broken homes of people who are still technically married on paper and who still live under the same roof. I've seen more brokenness in those homes. I think that you might have physically left home. That was a matter of geography. You never left.
I never left, yeah.
I think it was your 73rd birthday, if I'm not mistaken. I'd come to the office, and while leaving, you told me, so Pooja Bhatt, what if you walk out of this office and you never see me again? And I remember telling you that I promise you one thing, is that if that's the case, you're not leaving behind an emotional pygmy.
That's the most gratifying thing I've heard, because all that man loves, he has to part with. And because life doesn't last, it's beautiful. That's why the fragrance of the flower intoxicates you, because it withers and crumbles.
Yeah.
Let me tell you with complete responsibility and absolute authority of an elder who's lived for 77 years on this planet, that Pooja Bhatt is a better version of Mahesh Bhatt.
That's very generous of you.
It's not generous, it's a fact of life. The only thing which I would urge you on your show is don't let anybody impose his will and his way of life on you. But for God's sake, remember, you too must refrain from doing that to others. If you can do that, you will score like you cannot imagine. You'll be like a blazing volcano.
Thank you, Mr. Bhatt, for being my first guest. It's been a privilege and honor, as much as it has, to have been and to always be your daughter.
So blaze on, baby. Blaze on.
Blaze on. Thank you.
Thank you, my dear.
Thank you. The Pooja Bhatt Show is produced by Mammoth Media Asia and Epilogue Entertainment and distributed by iHeart Podcasts. The executive producer is Jonathan Strickland.